let's get to it. Abbasids versus Mongols. Leenock wondered when he was going to whip this out in this series, wondered if he was going to save it back, because I think, did we have Lipany as the third map?
I think so, yes.
We did. Yeah, so kind of surprised Leenock didn't take it there. Then again, remember, we just watched this mad lad whip out the French and stomp the Abbasids, so clearly has a differing opinion on how things should be played. Love to see Vortix whip out the Mongols, though. I've been curious to see what his kind of builds are going to be. I think this Civ is in a question mark phase on what's next, and Vortix has been one of those trendsetters. You mentioned his phenomenal win rates in the Golden League, the previous big S-tier tournament we had in Age of Empires 4.
It's also interesting to take a look at the fact that for a long time, I think in Road to Red Bull Wololo, the players are selecting the built-in maps more and more. In the preceding weeks, we have seen a lot of those custom maps being used. We had sets where we didn't even have a single built-in map, and it's becoming more and more common this week that we have just Lipany, Dry Arabia being the home map, sometimes Altai even mixed in as well. So players starting to deviate a little bit more from the custom maps, go back to the good old-fashioned meta of Dry Arabia, Lipany, which once again could prove interesting from the perspective that we could possibly be going back to the good old meta of Mongols usage, good old meta of Abbasids usage on these built-in maps.
Yeah, I think what it was is that a lot of the kind of OG players, right, the top 8 or whatever you have were playing so much they maybe kind of got bored of the static maps, and they were really on board with the idea of the new ones. And a lot of the fresher players or less hours invested type players also wanted these fresh maps because you have to think of it as a soft reset, right? Like, let's go to a different game comparison. CSGO and Valorant.
Minecraft.
No, we're not doing Minecraft today, Lidakor. That's Thursdays. But like, you'll like this one. CSGO and Valorant, just stick with me on this. A lot of people right now are like, whoa, aiming, clicking heads feels weird, champ. We're here for the RTS. But the whole idea is the refresher. There's a lot of people that like the idea of CSGO, a lot of people with potential, but they're playing from behind. They're playing against people with thousands of hours up on them. And I think there's a similar concept that's going to evolve in AoE 4. It's why I love that we use these custom maps to refresh things, because there are talented individuals that maybe don't have the same level of wisdom because they haven't played Dry Arabia 1,000 times.
Yeah, that's a great point that you bring up indeed, and this actually sets Age of Empires apart from many other competitive esports that, as you said, you have these soft resets, and if you go to extremes like what AoE 2 has, every single tournament has massively different map pools, and every single tournament requires the players to specifically prepare for that tournament, opens up opportunities for players willing to spend time and energy on preparing special strategies for special maps featured in that specific tournament.
Yeah, I think like there's always this rush to compare like esports to traditional sports, and I think actually one cool, really big thing that differentiates esports. There's many things, by the way, but one big thing to highlight that differentiates it is that esports change. Traditional sports very rarely change. Esports does, and I think that's like, it stops this gatekeeping element where because you played for a lot longer, you are just inherently better. There's an X factor to it, right? Where if we keep soft resetting or introducing new things, same way as when we patch the game, you have to evolve the game. It's why we often talk about this being X players patch or Y players meta, right? It's never just they're the all-time great. Like if they want to be the all-time great, it feels like a bigger achievement. I'm not discounting what people do in traditional sports, but I think like, I just like to bring up that comparison because I noticed, like, especially in the last year or two, people keep saying make esports more like sports, and I just keep saying hell no. Like, what we got is special, and what we've got is unique.
It's different, right? It's very much something that complements the traditional sports. Traditional sports feature the fact that you really have something that's set in stone, and everybody that's new to that sport just has to become better on the fine details. Whereas for esports, it's more about adapting for the changes to come. And the two things, they are nice on their own, and the beautiful thing is when both of those are there, and both of those are something we can witness.
And what we're witnessing is kind of your standard chill opening. Vortix needs to find a way of maybe applying some pressure. He did get that initial outpost down, but you can already see that there's a sneak out point around the backside. Curious to me is whether Vortix is going to double down on this pressure, or if he's going to do that atypical thing we see a lot of Mongol players do, where they just fall back and go for a castle age rush, which I do think is the wrong way to approach this matchup.
I think you can justify doubling down on this one. If you take a look at the stone spot, both of the starting stones of our red player Leenock are essentially on the same screen right next to the tower. And the third one is on the far right, also something that could be easily denied by Vortix. So you could severely delay the second town center of the Abbasids over here. You probably won't be able to stop it because there's gonna be an archer making a battering ram. But even delaying that town center by 1 or 2 minutes here is immensely valuable for a Mongol player.
Yeah, and do you want to know what I want to see out of Vortix in response to like what he's done so far? Because I like step one. Kind of crazy idea, but I actually think it's like underrated. Vortix going for a second TC of his own quickly.
Yep. Or fast castle. that would be even better, I think.
I think fast castle like can be a bit of a bait though, because okay, what are you going to do if you're a Mongol player and you rush castle? What's the first thought in your mind? What's the thing you always go and build?
Relics. I mean, I'm not gonna build relics, but I want to go for them.
Wait. Oh, so you play a different build of the game. That's clearly alpha mode. All right, NDA on that one. But for real, it's going to be Lancers, right? You're going to go for relics, but you want Lancers. Yep. And that's the worst unit to build the Abbasids. Like, if Vortix goes castle, I'm fine with it as long as he doesn't build Lancers. But I've got this
but Man-at-Arms
really
could work.
bad feeling. Yeah, Man-at-Arms is better, but I've got this bad feeling because they always do it. Once a Mongol player rushes castle, instantly they just spam out Lancers. And it's the worst thing you can build against the Abbasids.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think the reason why it could be appealing is because he could have at least 3-4 relics fall into his hand, and he can still double down on a second TC once in Castle Age. That's actually something that the Mongols more commonly do than Feudal Age second TC. But yeah, I agree with you. At some point, he's gonna have to find a way to have a rapid eco expansion because Leenock found a way to access stone himself. He's got archers nearby to protect those, so the spearmen by themselves won't be enough to push away the wheels, and Leenock will have a second TC in the next few minutes.
Yeah, I like the wide angle he took as well because Vortix was letting up off the pressure. We can see he's trying to mount it up now with the Horseman. So Prolonged Feudal does seem to be the strategy for Vortix. It's just, I mean, I'm kind of curious what the next step for him is because like in a Prolonged Feudal state, if you suspect for a moment the Abbasid player is going to get a second TC up, I think you are like hardwired to a 10-minute aggressive time with a ram or you don't do anything to them.
Ooh, Leenock loses one of the scouts. Yeah, that's going to be ugly because you're already playing a very defensive game confined to your own base, so if your vision gets denied, especially against a hyper-aggressive civilization like the Mongols possibly, that's gonna hurt.
Yeah, it's just a case of what comes next for Vortix. Like, I'm not seeing the full schematic yet. Like, going Horseman Spears does feel weird to me against Leenock that's already shown archers, but then can easily transition to spears himself. I think, like, the thing for me is, like, Vortix, if he wants to play this Prolonged Feudal, I think he has to do the Holy Trinity, all three. And quickly snipe the second TC, because I actually think that the Abbasids are very comfortable countering a stable Rax composition from the Mongols.
Yeah, for sure they are. So, as you said, it has to be a Holy Trinity, Archers, Spearmen, and Horsemen. Looks like we do have some Horsemen coming out here for Vortix, so no desire for him to go to Castle Age immediately, though he's banking up some resources. Looks like he's still gonna try to apply some pressure, do some raiding damage, but it seems to me that he's still not gonna go full feudal here, instead working his way towards Castle.
And at the risk of banging my head against the keyboard on repeat from saying it, it's kind of unfortunate when you get games where Mongol players have complete map control but don't use it. Like, you can see the Leenock is fully walling himself in. Vortix is doing a good job of that.
Oh, there's an opening. Scout coming in clutch.
Okay, but here's something to keep in mind, Lida. Like, you're Vortix right now. I know, all your hair just fell off.
Unfortunately, I'm not.
You are one of the best players in the world. You feel really great.
I'm most definitely not one of the best.
Very humble of you, but we're going to try to put ourselves in his mindset right now. Like, I'm Vortix. I have full map control. My opponent's on the defensive. I can see he's on the defensive because he's building up walls. And I can see that his going stable's archery range, so I know he's defensive. Why am I not playing pocket ecos right now?
Yeah, good point. You could justify moving out a little bit. I guess he's a little afraid of like 1 or 2 camel archers sneaking past. And remember, this is match point for Leenock, so he maybe doesn't want to risk things too much. And with the Mongols, you can definitely just play with a very, very tight eco. He has went for an early pasture, so he's gonna have enough sheep to work with. And I feel like it's just a higher risk for Vortix that he doesn't really want to take, given the state of this set.
I see where you come from, but like realistically, like my perspective on it is you're gonna have to invest in pastures or play pocket ecos. You can see that he set up the pastures, but this maybe leads to a less optimal timing. I once again come back to that thought with like the second 2C build. I think it's like it seems a bit greedy, but if you do see the Leenock's playing defensive, maybe there's more value in going onto the deer nearby and then using the extra wood to get a second TC in conjunction with castle. It does sound greedy, But at the same time, you force Leenock to make so many defensive maneuvers. I actually think it's a free play in this game.
It's an interesting concept that you bring up, and I don't necessarily disagree. I think he's a little scared that we've talked about this one, that the Abbasids can quickly shift from an eco-focused approach to an army-focused approach. So he might be scared to go for a very greedy approach, because even though Leenock is playing a very defensive and eco-focused game right now, in the next few minutes an expansion TC from Vortix could possibly be punished easily by Leenock. And instead, it seems like he finds, or he thinks he's going to find more value in a fast castle, getting the buff from the step redoubt. Still has to invest into pastures, but at least he's set up long-term with the food eco. He's going to have map control, he's going to secure relics for himself this way, and that is how he's going to offset the eco deficit that should be there, though in reality, Leenock is only leading by 4 vills.
Yes, and someone like I want to be mindful of the chat. I want everyone to realize this. Like, you know, we often get wrapped up in God vision. We see everything. We have to remember that Vortix doesn't. So maybe that's the way the paranoia comes from.
Yep.
But at the same time, he does have double scout, and he has been keeping momentum in Leenock's base. So in theory, like, he should have the required info. I think maybe what's happened here is Vortix is one of those players that has like locked in build orders, right? Because this is something that like some people have that preference where they'll follow a script for the first 10-15 minutes, and other players are full reactionary. And I've got a feeling this was a locked in build order for Vortix, which is why we didn't see the deviation.
I think it's also a mindset in many ways. So this type of build, Dark Age Tower Rush into a fast castle, second TC and relics, this is essentially a mindset by these players. As you said, some like to deviate from it, play pocket ecos with the Mongols. We have seen even board plays being pulled off using the Mongols. Vortix is one of those old school Mongol players who just loves this very much OG, efficient and relatively low risk type of a build. That's probably the reason why he's just sticking with this.
Definitely. I think that's something we're going to see players optimize in the coming weeks. Like, I've been warned, Mongols, you know, they are feeling a bit weak right now, but I just think it's the transition is missing. And I think we're starting to see evolutions of that, the second TC build with improved forestry coming out. But Vortix actually proving pretty bullyish even without those elements. You can see that he's now just starting to somehow make the House of Wisdom crumble because the outpost has been there blocking the front side for so long. In fact, check the vision for Vortix, and you'll see what I was talking about throughout this whole point around the builds he could have went for. Like, he's actually dictated map flow as well as vision. Leenock hasn't been able to make a single move without Vortix knowing about it.
And as you're saying that, Leenock isn't even making a move with the villagers that are being slain on the wood line. All the eco lead is gone.
Wait,
this is a blunder by Leenock. Holy potatoes.
Going the other way. Leenock, mistakes made there. We'll finally start peeling back the villagers, but so many woodworkers going down. And this is the weakness of a static comp. And it's crazy to think, actually, Leenock full-walled the left side, yet his army wasn't guarding the right side, Lidda.
Oh, it's so painful. You are trying to build up an eco lead, but you have none. 44 villagers to 42. You're slower to cost lage than your opponent. Vortix, he's working his way towards the second TC. You can see it on the minimap. Also picking up the relics. All the eco advantage that you were supposed to have to offset that relic deficit is now gone. He's gonna try to compensate with a third TC, but you really get the feel that it might come too late.
Yeah, you're talking third TC against a second TC coming out from Vortix in conjunction with the relics he's now collecting. This should easily be a 4 relic, possibly even a 5 relic game for Vortix, unless Leenock gets his ass out of his base soon. Worrisome detail for him doing that, by the way. Think about what Leenock has built so far. Racks and archery ranges. He actually doesn't have the fluidity to move wide on the map. Instead, Leenock was planning to build for a 20-minute death ball that might come too late.
We shall see. We know that the Abbasids really start to rise to power beyond that 16, 17, 18 minute mark. So this is where the Abbasid eco is supposed to come online. This is where the Abbasids really start to gain their power spike. The problem is that Leenock is heavily delayed because of the villagers we have seen being killed. So this power spike is going to be delayed, allowing Vortix a lot more wiggle room here to leverage the map control he currently has.
Yeah, and someone wants to see how Vortix in the next 3 minutes is a transition. These Lancers have paid for themselves. They've done a phenomenal job, but you are up against the Abbasids. This is a long-term strategy, is a losing strategy, because the Abbasids love a justification for both spears and camels, and nothing justifies them better than seeing heavy cavalry on the other side.
And it is mostly heavy cavalry from Vortix. He still has some leftover spears, but there is going to be a hard switch into crossbows now. Full crossbow is the unit choice for Vortix. Combined with some siege weapons to deal with possible archers, this could be a lethal comp and something hard to deal with for Leenock.
Oh, he's actually doing a variable on Leenock's build from the first game. It's more or less like mirroring the same concept, right? Like raid with a little bit of cavalry, then create a static comp to siege him with mass trebuchets. And he might hit his timing. A little bit harder to achieve against this Civ than the HRE, though, because remember, the Abbasids have the ability to build siege in the field, same as the Mongols. So I actually love watching this matchup, because if you do get siege warfare, it's heavily saturated. And there's a compounding snowball effect to it, because you have this ability to build siege away from your base.
Yeah, indeed, that is something that the Abbasids can use to swing the battle in their favor. Then again, the Mongols can do the exact same thing, and so we once again get back to the point where if the two players are doing something very similar, but one of them has a clear eco and map control advantage, that usually swings it in their favor.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, what I love about this matchup, right, is like, there's a flexibility to siege on both sides on the go, and I think it leads to really cool, interesting dynamics and really fun stage fights. What I'm going to be looking for is whether one player tries to flank attack. I think the advantage is still there for Vortix. Leenock doesn't have the numbers to do so. And although he's got these walls up, let's consider a long siege warfare back and forth. You know, Treb, Springles, everything trading out. 7 Lancers could torch through a palisade wall without Leenock noticing. And if that happens, that might just be the GG moment when you lose that many villagers.
Yeah, but on the other side, there are not a single wall placement, obviously, for the Mongols, so raiding is a possibility, especially when the villagers are so far out with no step redoubt right next to them, but that's something that Vortix is gonna fix. But the lack of walls could start haunting Vortix in the next, like, 10 minutes or so. That's essentially the period where he doesn't really have a massive number of towers to protect his eco with, but he's also obviously lacking walls, so he could be exposed to raids.
Vortix heard you clearly, which is why he's now building a wall of outposts right next to Leenock's base. And remember, this pressure is going to mount up. It's going to mount up as well, Lidakor, because it's 2 landmarks, remember, that you're dealing with the Abbasids. And a Maganel, ooh, you need to be careful.
Yeah,
Give some
really
respect over. The trace shot coming, damn, that's a heavy hit. The staggered formation as they switched over means they take maximum damage from the Maganel shot. They lose the ram.
Gets taken down too.
Yeah, this is problematic, actually, because Leenock hasn't had the ability to build in siege yet. He should be able to with a superior economy, but I think he's somewhat budgeted. He has got reserve golds behind his base, but he doesn't seem like he's been taxing them heavily to get into the siege yet. It means that Vortix is ahead, and ahead by a notable margin here. Although their military counts are similar, I want you to highlight the difference here in that Vortix has a lot more premium units on the field.
They are premium units indeed, and the more concerning detail here for Leenock is that it's one thing that he's behind an army, but he will soon have to fight, simply because his landmarks are rather exposed. Slowly but surely that House of Wisdom has been taking a punishment from the towers, and now with Attraction Trebuchets and Mangonels appearing, you really can have the potential to contest that landmark even if you're Vortix, and then the starting TC is right next to it, so clock is ticking here for Leenock, you get the feel.
I love how Vortix is actually going after the secondary TC first, though.
Ooh, nice.
He's not even rushing down the landmarks. Oh, I don't think he's going to get the time for it, though. You can see the Springles are being built up. I love this wall from Leenock. Remember what he's up against. It's heavy cavalry. He's chipped through the tree line, so he's going to be exposed. Doesn't want to give that vulnerability over, though. However, Vortix is reaching a transition point. Less reliant on Lancers, more on a strong force to breach down the center. And you see how quickly it's amassing. Speaking of amassing, the Lancers, they see a pinch opportunity. They're going to wrap in a lot of villages in this area, and Leenock, the static response, is going to be slow to respond. Vortix will bait a lot of attention over here, which means the Springwalls are not dealing with the trebuchets.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Those knights, they will just run past the walls over here because the walls are not complete, distracting Leenock, pulling that slow-moving army composition to the right side. And while that was happening, Leenock did not decide or just forgot to repair that one center that was under fire. Town center is gonna be gone, so the expansion TC taken down rather easily here for Vortix for essentially no losses on his side.
No, and now he's just going to siege the extra TC, the main one here, right? Put him in a situation where Leenock has no choices. I actually love the way he's doing this, by the way. Taking out the more defensive landmark means Leenock has to fight more aggressively when it comes down to just the House of Wisdom. It means that Leenock might actually go a bit too fast here and make a mistake. And if you look at the Springwall count, you can see how those mistakes can come out. Leenock right now only has a 1 anti-siege advantage, and he has to dive in towards a triple outpost layout for Vortix.
First volley coming out here, targeting the trebuchets as well. Trebs throwing away the fire, but as you said, there are towers there as well. And there is quite a lot of just counterattack potential here, even for Vortix. He could possibly dive in with the crossbows, try and snipe the Springolds. And as you said, right now Leenock needs a decisive anti-siege advantage, something he does not simply have.
Yeah, he does have that counterweight trebuchet there. That's the one big detail to consider here. He can quickly erase these outposts about the same speed as they'll be going up remember, with the attack speed that you have, the fact that it takes a minute to build the outpost, then the upgrades afterwards, means the Vortix, the longer he waits here, the worse it actually gets for him. Sure, we can talk about the fact that he plays Pocket Ecos finally, and he has most of the map under his control, but Leenock is reaching a breakout point.
Yeah, he's escalating really fast. You see, he's up to 22 crossbows himself, essentially matching the numbers of Vortix, and it's 89 army versus 86, but it's a little deceiving because most of those are in Springolds, and those could be subject to very delicate micro over here. I feel like the next engagement coming up in like the next 1 or 2 minutes is gonna be the make or break for either side.
Spearman positioning is going to be critical here. Leenock really can overwhelm. 43 spears with phalanx means they're able to double up on the damage that would come out from the other side. In fact, it's actually more than double up. Remember, it's 20 spears versus 47. Let's see as they march in. They're going to clash Spearman, trying to bait in the assault. Camel's going to be overwhelmed, and now the clash comes out. Lance is even arriving in the fight as well. Crossbow's overwhelmed. The attack speed arrow finally comes out. That's why Leenock backs up. He wants to wait for that buff to be gone before turning around for the fight. Spear trade coming out, but Leenock missed micro here. The Springles aren't assaulting at all. The Trebuchet's going to go down. Mistakes being made. Vortix makes heavy sacrifice with his front line, but gets a damn good trade, taking out practically all of Leenock's siege.
Oh, the siege gone over here. The infantry had to pull back because the Mangonel was there, and the Springles, they did not want to risk diving on the Mangonel, so they pulled back, but Vortix was able to get so many good snipes on them. Took down 4 or 5 Springolds for the price of like 1 or 2 at best for Leenock. And once again, the Trebs will keep shelling those buildings, and sense of urgency has to kick in, and now Leenock will be forced to take a fight where he's severely underpowered when it comes to anti-siege. He's down to 3 Springolds as opposed to 7.
Yeah, and something that's tough for me to watch here is Leenock now switching over to Man-at-Arms. You can pay a similar price to get Horseman. Horseman is your way back into this game now. I think actually going to Man-at-Arms makes this impossible. Like, your issue there was you didn't have the speed to gap close or do anything. So Man-at-Arms don't actually solve that problem. You're already up against about 40 crossbows. It feels like a game-losing comp now coming out from Lee.
I wonder what he sees. He might not even know he's up against that many crossbows. He might have limited vision on this, because it's really puzzling why he's adding mass men-at-arms against 40 crossbowmen out there. There's no way the men-at-arms can do anything in that battle.
I'm thinking it's because he only has racks right now, and spears aren't going to fare better, so he just wants something chunky. I finally see him queuing up for Horseman, but he has limited stables. I think the issue right now is there's this burden for Leenock to replace the siege lost, but also he needs that wood to build more military infrastructure. I'd rather he just doubles down on Horseman, though. I think Horseman either win you this game or you lose anyway.
He needs to go. The TC is on fire. He has to charge in here with the infantry. Crossbows will trade shots, but there again is the con arrow. Springbolt setting up once again, and the Mangonel yet to join the fight. First volley comes in, beautiful hit on the crossbows. This is a decisive victory so far by Vortix in this engagement.
Wrap around from the Spearman, though. The Spearman added up a lot of damage here onto the Springles on the side, and they go for the trade out, but the trade is like decent for Leenock because of the stabbing from these Spearmen. They're actually doing a better job than the Springles, most of them being cleaned up, and Leenock pushing back. Vortix army quickly being reduced. Yes, he still has the number advantage, but he no longer has a clear dominant siege advantage, especially when you consider that Leenock is now trying to stockpile a bunch of horsemen to rush through next.
Started out so well here for Vortix, but then the Spearman just did so much work to deal with the Springolds. Still though, now he's up against so many towers, many of them having Springold emplacements on, and look at the landmark. The town center is not yet repaired. There is only one landmark left for Leenock. You could die.
Leenock has 2k wood though, he can repair fast here, but he would be sacrificing gathering.
He needs to, because the House of Wisdom is on fire and only 3 villagers repairing.
Where's the army going? The army's marching south side, they're not even going to the front side.
And he's repairing their landmark! The town center is not repaired! If the landmark goes down here, it's game over.
It's on fire right now. House of Wisdom looking like the House of the Dumb right now. No repairs coming out. It looks like Vortix is going to even this up. Leenock did not have the villagers in position to get the repairs. House of Wisdom is going to fall, and that means we are going to need a map number 3.
Oh man, Leenock didn't seem to notice that his TC is not fully repaired, and when the landmark goes down, you only get it back if you fully repair it. It seemed like he was satisfied with 30% repairs, went to repair the other landmark, failed to realize that this is not gonna be sufficient, and loses the House of Wisdom to the Trebuchet's next volley, loses the game with that. His spot was already difficult, but this sealed the deal for Vortix, who evens out the set with a point on the board for him as well.
What did I just witness? I'm so perplexed right now. Leenock has so many villages at his disposal. He has 2k wood surplus, but I don't know where they were. I don't know what the hell was going on there. Also, the horseman comp that was meant to come out, delayed extension to that. I think we saw maybe 5 or 6 max at the end. There's so many puzzling details at the end of this game coming out from Lee. I'm a little bit surprised. Vortix, definitely phenomenal display and good identification to end the game fast off the back of this. But I do feel like Lee kind of missed a trick. Maybe it's going to be a little bit tight, but the fact that you don't like emergency pull 20, 30 villages for repair there surprises me immensely here.
Yeah, I mean, you always try to find justification for the actions of players, but here you're a little puzzled because there is nothing that doesn't justify just pulling villagers to keep yourself alive. It really seems like he didn't notice how precarious his position was with the landmarks, and by the time he noticed, it was just too late. And as you pointed out, Vortix, quick with the reaction, punishes that mistake from Leenock and secures the game here.
I mean, maybe it's just a case of Leenock fault